Did you know that migraine is one of the most common medical conditions in the world? Yes, in fact, 1 in 8 people has migraine. So either you, a family member, a friend, a coworker, a neighbor, someone you know has migraine, or maybe multiple people have migraine. But many people who have migraine don't realize that the answer is not just popping pills. It's not taking over-the-counter Excedrin or Tylenol or Advil or taking prescription medications. There is so much people can do to fight migraine naturally simply by implementing some tips that have to do with your diet and your lifestyle. And so what are these tips? Well, stay tuned for this week's episode of the IQ Podcast with me, your host, Dr. Rani Banik, and I'm going to share with you my 5 top tips that helped me break free of my cycle of chronic migraine for over 5 years. So you don't want to miss this one. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the IQ Podcast, hosted by Dr. Rani Banik, America's integrative neuro-ophthalmologist. Get ready to explore the intricate connections between the brain and the eye through neuro-ophthalmology. Journey with Dr. Rani into the world of integrative ophthalmology, where cutting-edge science meets holistic wellness. Discover how to protect and preserve vision through powerful preventative strategies based on eye-smart nutrition and lifestyle modifications. Whether you're an eye care provider or just curious about how to maintain healthy vision so you can see the world more clearly, join Dr. Rani for exciting and eye-opening discussions which will no doubt raise your IQ.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the IQ Podcast, where you can gain insights on vision health and brain health, and also raise your IQ. I'm your host, Dr. Rani Banik, America's integrative neuro-ophthalmologist. And today, I thought that I would share 5 of my top tips for how to manage migraines naturally. I've done a previous episode on migraine, so you can check that out, in which I talked about the visual aspects of migraine, the different types of vision issues that can occur, including flashing lights, which we know as visual aura, and also light sensitivity, dry eye. But today, I thought I would make things a little bit more personal and share my journey with migraine and 5 of the techniques that worked best for me to help me reduce the severity and frequency of my symptoms. So here we go. Let me begin with sharing my story, because I think this is really important to put everything into context. And this story has been, my journey with migraine has really been so instrumental in shifting my career from being a traditional doctor to being an integrative physician, incorporating more nutrition and lifestyle and mindset, et cetera, into my practice for myself and for my patients. So let's begin with my migraine story. So it all began when I was in my 20s in medical school, and I'll never forget this day. I was studying for exams. This was the end of my second year of medical school, and I was studying for my final exams. I was in the science library at Brown University, and if any of you have been to Brown, you know that there's a huge library that we call the Sci-Li. So I was up there on maybe like the 12th or 13th floor or something, studying like crazy, really, really stressed. And all of a sudden, I started to see flashing lights. And I really had no idea what was going on. They were like these colorful lights. They were moving. Now that I think back on it, they were like a classic zigzag pattern as we see in visual aura. But when it was happening to me, I had no idea what it was. And even though I had some medical background, I was, in medical school learning about all these different things, I really thought I was having a stroke. I really did. So at the age of, I forget how old I was, probably like 22 or 23, I thought I was having a stroke when these vision issues came, and I didn't know what to do. And there wasn't really anyone around me, actually. And so maybe I didn't do the smartest thing, but all I did was I just lay my head down, and then I rested my head and waited until it passed. And then after it passed, I realized what had happened is that I had my first migraine with aura. And soon afterward, I went home right away, and I actually ended up just sleeping the rest of the day. I couldn't even get out of bed. I was just out, completely out, feeling really sick and, nauseated. And I didn't throw up. I didn't vomit, but I felt like I needed to. I didn't want any stimuli. So I had just had my first migraine with aura. So for those of you who've experienced this, you know how scary it can be the first time. But luckily it is a relatively benign phenomenon. So anyway, my first migraine back in my early 20s. And then after that, basically every time I would have a period of intense stress, I would develop a migraine. So it wasn't that often. It could be anywhere from like every 6 months to every 2 years, depending on my stress level. And it really was not very impactful in my life in any major way. I knew what it was. I would just wait for it to pass, maybe take some over-the-counter Tylenol or Advil for the headache, and it would just go away. So that went on for most of my 20s, 30s. Then there was a period in my early 40s when I was really like stretched very, very thin. I was working full time. More than full time. I was seeing patients, I was teaching, I was doing surgeries, I was doing research, I was doing all of that. And I had a young child at home, and we were doing a major renovation for our home. We did a gut renovation. So it was extremely stressful trying to balance work and home and the construction. And, we were basically displaced from our apartment, like we had nowhere to go for a couple of weeks. It was a very, very stressful time. And so I started to get migraines more frequently, migraine attacks more frequently. And it got to the point where I remember this, I was trying to be a good mom. So I accompanied my daughter on one of her school trips. She was in second grade, and I hadn't had time. I hadn't slept well the night before. I hadn't had time to eat anything. So I basically went on an empty stomach, and then I was chaperoning all these second graders, and had a great time. We went to the United Nations. It was a tour of the United Nations for the second grade. And in the middle of it, I started to get this headache, and I was like, oh, it's a migraine coming on. I know why, because I haven't eaten and I'm stressed, etc. But that day, I will never forget it. I was hungry, poor sleep, plus all the noise and, loud kids and everything. It was really stressful. And then I had to go to work right after that. So that day was the beginning of the rest of my journey with migraine, because starting that day, I developed a migraine every single day. Yes. So I went from having episodic migraine to having chronic daily migraine. And it was horrible. If you've ever had a migraine, you know how debilitating it can be. But imagine waking up every single day with a stabbing, pounding sensation behind your eye. And then sometimes it would spread above, to this side of my head. And then it would suddenly switch sides, and it would go the other side. And sometimes it would go behind my other eye, or maybe it would go down my neck and be kind of like a really sore area right here in my neck, this annoying soreness. So it would change from day to day, or even, from hour to hour. Sometimes it would change. But basically, I lived with this headache every single day for years. And I had, along with it, I had severe light sensitivity. I would have to drive my daughter to school in the morning, and I just couldn't even take the bright sun. Gorgeous days, I dreaded them because it was just so intolerable. The light was really, really hard. So I wore really dark shades. I actually got these migraine glasses, these FL41 tinted glasses. We can talk about that in a different episode, but it was really a very difficult few years for me. And, it's not that I didn't seek care. I went to, I live in New York City. I went to some of the top headache specialists that were available to me here in New York. And what did they do? One after another, they wrote me a script. Okay, try this one. Okay, try this, this Imitrex didn't work for you. Sumatriptan didn't work. Now let's try rizatriptan, or let's try frovatriptan. Let's try this. Let's try amitriptyline. Let's try Topamax. I went through a whole regimen of different medications for migraine that have been used to treat migraine. And either they didn't work, or if they did work, they left me with really severe side effects where I felt like I was a zombie walking around in this brain fog all the time. It was really not a good existence to have to live with that, but and also work, take care of people, take care of patients, and also take care of the home. So I never want to go back to that again. But just to kind of let you know, like I tried everything I possibly could at that time, at least what I thought was available to me, and nothing was working. And it wasn't until I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, also a neuro-ophthalmologist who also trained in integrative and functional medicine. And I was explaining to him about my headaches. And he said, well, Rani, have you ever tried an elimination diet? And I looked at him, I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that before. What's an elimination diet? And he basically said to me, well, it's where you eliminate certain foods that can be triggers for inflammation. Maybe you have this chronic inflammation going on in your brain. Maybe, in addition to that, your brain mitochondria are not working properly. They're not providing enough energy properly. And diet and lifestyle are the key. And that was the first time someone had ever mentioned anything like that to me. And it was just like, wow, this light bulb went off in my brain that all along I'd been trying to medicate myself for my migraine, over-the-counter medications, prescription medications, but I never really thought that my diet or my lifestyle could be playing a role. Meanwhile, I have to confess this, it's really embarrassing now that I think about it, but it was really the harsh reality of my life at that time. I was eating fast food all the time because of my crazy schedule. I was living off of pizza, ice cream every day, and Diet Cherry Coke every day. And not just one or two, I was having so much caffeine during this period. I was having anywhere from 8 to 12 caffeinated beverages a day. Yeah, so I would have my Diet Cherry Coke. I would have Snapple, Diet Snapple. I would have tea. I would have coffee. I mean, basically anything I drank. I never drank water, by the way. Everything I drank would have some level of caffeine in it. And I was trying to use that as a way to manage my headaches, to help to decrease my headaches. But, it was crazy. Like I was eating like that for years, and not a single one of my headache doctors had ever asked me, well, what do you, how much are you eating? Like, or not how much are you eating? Let's cut that. Not a single one of my headache doctors ever asked me, well, Rani, what do you eat? What's your diet like? Or how much coffee do you have? How much caffeine do you have in your diet? Or better yet, how's your stress? How much are you sleeping? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you exercising? Not a single doctor asked me those questions. Yet, what I later realized was that those choices that I was making, my diet choices, my lifestyle choices, were perpetuating my headaches. And I never, ever, ever thought that I myself could be propagating these symptoms. And this was all under my control, or mostly under my control. And so it wasn't until, again, my colleague in integrative and functional medicine asked me, what are you doing for your diet? And once I started to realize, okay, maybe eating this way is not the best way. And, so enthralled by this whole concept of diet and lifestyle for health that I ended up going to a conference for functional medicine. It was a primer. It was a 5-day conference in Baltimore that I attended. I took time off from work, from my family. I went. I was like, I have to go. I have to learn this stuff. And so it was really eye-opening, pun intended. It was eye-opening what I learned during that 5 days at AFMCP. So, oh gosh, I don't even remember what it stands for anymore. AFMCP. Advanced Functional Medicine Clinical Practice. I forget the exact name of it. But anyway, if anyone's interested, I can share it with you in the show notes below. But it's put on by Institute for Functional Medicine, or IFM, and they put on these courses, and they have a certification program. So I went to the first course, and I fell in love with the ideas that I was learning. And I was like, wow, why didn't I learn any of this in medical school? About the importance of diet, about doing an elimination diet, about testing for food sensitivities or testing for toxins, about maintaining a healthy gut microbiome, about alleviating stressors, about managing or helping to promote healthy mitochondrial function. I didn't learn any of this in medical school, but I'm so glad that my colleague suggested it and that I ended up going, because it really changed the trajectory of not only my health, but my career. Because first I started to incorporate a lot of those principles. I went on an elimination diet for 3 weeks, and then it really helped me overhaul my diet in general. So I was eating a lot less processed food and junk foods and eating more natural foods and hydrating more. But basically, I started to incorporate those principles for not just myself, but for my patients and my patient care also. So what I'm going to share with you, that's my story. So that's what finally turned my migraine journey around, my horrific journey for, I guess it was like over 5 years with migraine, is the importance of doing an integrative and functional medicine approach rather than doing prescription medications. And, I shouldn't say it's rather than. For some people, it could be complementary. You can do this alongside prescription medications. But for me, those prescription medications hadn't worked, so I had to find a different path. And this is what worked for me. And so now I'm much better. And fortunately, it's not that my migraines are cured. There's no cure for migraine, but I'm much better. I have much fewer attacks, and I know how to ward them off with the right precautions and making the right choices. So now, in the next 15 minutes or so, now that I've shared my story, I'm going to go through with you my 5 top tips for how to manage migraines naturally. So tip number 1 is diet. And I talked about this earlier about how we should try to shift away from having, or I needed to shift away from having unhealthy foods that were processed, high in sugar content, high in unhealthy fats like fried foods or deep fried foods, for example, processed foods, etc. And you want to include more natural products in your diet. So fruits, veggies should be the staple. And so what I tell everyone is start with that foundation, work up to having 5 cups of fruits and veggies a day. 5 cups. Yes, 5 cups. I know that may seem like a tremendous amount for many people, especially if you barely have any fresh fruits or veggies. Let's say you only have like a little bit of lettuce on your burger, or maybe you have some tomatoes once in a while. You need to really bump up that intake to 5 cups a day. One thing I love are smoothies. So that's an easy way to get in about 4 to 5 cups right there, is to have a green smoothie a day. But there are many other ways you can do it: salads, soups, raw. So there's lots of different ways you can bump up your veggie and fruit intake. So that's number 1. So include veggies and fruits as the primary source of nutrition in your diet. So if you're thinking about your plate, if you divide your plate up, half of your plate should be fruits and veggies, different colors, etc. 1/4 should be a good protein source, and 1/4 can be some form of carbohydrate. This is actually an extrapolation of the Canadian food plate. So in Canada, their health system, they updated their dietary guidelines, and they created this food plate that is, again, half of it. If you take the circle, draw it down the middle, half of it will be fruits and vegetables, 1/4 your protein of choice, whether it's an animal-based product or whether it's a plant-based product, doesn't matter. And then 1/4 would be your carbohydrate of choice. Eat the veggies first, eat the fruits and veggies first to fill you up with that. It's also great because it will help to promote your gut microbiome and help give you lots of fiber and antioxidants as well. So that's tip number 1. Include that, but also stay away from the unhealthy stuff. So stay away from the SAD diet, standard American diet, SAD, which is, again, unhealthy omega-6 fats, ultra-processed foods, and simple sugars. So you want to do more complex carbohydrates instead. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, hydration. So simple, but so important, especially when it comes to migraine. I've had countless patients come to me because they've had a really intense workout. They're at the gym doing their HIIT training or whatever it is they're doing. And then they start to see the flashing lights, and then they get the headache. So sometimes excess exercise plus dehydration can lead to the onset of an aura attack. So hydration status is really important in the treatment management of migraine. When we get dehydrated, our brains don't do so well. I won't go into all the nitty-gritty pathophysiology, but it has to do with blood flow and blood vessel tone, whether it's constriction or dilation. So you want to stay well hydrated. And if you're doing a lot of excessive exercise, make sure you're having an electrolyte drink and not sugary or not caffeinated. That's really key also. So how do you determine how much hydration you need? Well, check out, I have another podcast episode with my friend and colleague, Dr. Dana Cohn, where we talk about hydration. What are some hydration goals? How can you get hydration? So check out that episode for more tips on hydration. So that was tip number 2. Now, tip number 3. Is caffeine. I mentioned earlier how I was drinking 8 to 12 caffeinated beverages a day. So caffeine and migraine are together. It's like a double-edged sword when it comes to migraine, caffeine. So on one end, if you don't have a lot of caffeine in your diet, you can use caffeine therapeutically to help manage headaches. Sometimes having a cup of coffee or having a Coke will knock it out if you don't already have a high caffeine intake. And what I mean by that is less than 200 milligrams a day, which is about 2 cups of coffee a day. If you have more than that, then you're on the other end of the spectrum where too much caffeine may be propagating your headache, where caffeine works on receptors called adenosine receptors on blood vessels, and it helps to regulate the blood vessel tone. So the more caffeine you have, the less responsive your adenosine receptors are going to be. So you need more and more caffeine to have the same effect. So the more caffeine you have, the more and more you need to manage a migraine. So my tip is, if you already have a lot of caffeine in your diet, like I did, you want to slowly cut back on your caffeine. You don't want to go cold turkey, because that will inevitably cause you caffeine withdrawal headaches, which is a horrific type of headache. I've had it. You don't want that. You want to slowly cut back on your caffeine intake. And my recommendation is to cut back by half a cup a week. So every week you go down slowly by half a cup. You get your brain to recalibrate, re-equilibrate with, I think that's the word, equilibrate with your adenosine receptors. And so slowly cut back until you're down to 2 cups of coffee or less, or approximately 200 milligrams of caffeine or less a day. Okay, so now we've gone through 3 tips. Again, diet is really important, hydration, and caffeine. We have 2 more tips to go, but before we get to them, we're going to do a very short break. So I'll be right back. You've been listening to the IQ Podcast with me, Dr. Rani Banik. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back with more insights to help you raise your IQ.
Do you experience migraine attacks that go beyond just a headache, with symptoms like flashing lights, light sensitivity, dizziness, or trouble concentrating? Well, there's a solution you may want to consider. Recommended by America's integrative neuro-ophthalmologist, Dr. Rani Banik, MD.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rani Banik, and I specialize in migraine relief. Over the past 20 plus years, I have helped thousands of my patients reduce their headaches naturally with the power of nutrition and supplementation. Let me introduce you to Calm, a unique blend of powerful botanicals and micronutrients designed to support your journey towards managing migraine.
Calm contains 5 crucial science-backed ingredients: magnesium malate, riboflavin, feverfew, curcumin, and rosemary extract. Visit www.drranibanik.com to order and get 10% off your first purchase.
Don't let migraine control your life. Take the first step towards being migraine-free with Calm. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the IQ Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rani, and today we're talking about 5 tips on how to manage your migraine naturally. So far I covered 3 tips. We're up to tip number 4, which is, I think, so important, because it's helped me, it's helped countless of my patients, hundreds, if not thousands of my patients help manage their migraine naturally, which is supplementation. Yes. So I didn't know this before when I was going through my period of very severe chronic daily migraine, but there are many studies to show that certain supplements can help reduce the frequency and severity of migraine. And these ingredients include magnesium, and riboflavin, or vitamin B2. Now, the thing with magnesium is that the studies that were done with magnesium were actually done with the salt form of magnesium called magnesium oxide. And in the studies, they used about 400 milligrams of magnesium oxide for several months, and it helped people reduce the frequency and severity of their headaches. Now, the issue with magnesium oxide is that because it's a salt, it affects the GI system also. And in some people, it can cause cramping, it can cause loose stools, it can cause diarrhea. So unwanted GI side effects. So rather than to take a magnesium salt like magnesium oxide, even though that's what was used in the studies, I recommend to my patients to use a chelated form of magnesium, where chelation means that magnesium is bound to another molecule. And so there's a couple of chelated forms that I love. I particularly, I'm a huge fan of magnesium malate, which is a chelated form of magnesium, but also you can try magnesium glycinate, also known as bisglycinate, or magnesium threonate or L-threonate. And I'll include some links in the show notes below. But basically, any of these three forms of magnesium, anywhere from 144 milligrams to 250 milligrams a day usually is what I recommend for my patients. The second ingredient, the supplement I mentioned earlier, is riboflavin or B2. Now, this is an important B vitamin that is important in the mitochondrial energy production pathway. And we know that many people who have migraine are deficient in not only magnesium, but also vitamin B2. And actually, I did testing. I had some micronutrient testing done. And lo and behold, I was very, very deficient in B2. So no surprise there. But anyway, you can supplement. Now, the studies looking at B2 for migraine, they used a really high dose, 400 milligrams. And vitamin B2, if you've ever taken B vitamins, you know that it makes your urine yellow. So it makes you pee bright yellow, so like fluorescent. Don't be alarmed by that. That's just the color of the excess vitamin that's being excreted in your urine. But I don't necessarily think that 400 milligrams is necessary. First of all, it's hard to find 400 milligrams. Usually most supplements don't come in such a high dose, but I find that even as low as 150 milligrams can be really, really effective. So consider doing magnesium malate plus riboflavin at lower doses than what the studies have done, because it may work for you. And you don't have to do the super high dose. And also you can avoid the side effects. So if you're interested, I have a supplement in my supplement line, which is Ageless by Dr. Rani. This is a particular migraine. It's a supplement formulated specifically for migraine. It's called Calm, and it's really too small to read it here. But if you look at the ingredients, I'll put the link in the show notes. But basically, there is magnesium malate, there is riboflavin, but in addition to that, there's also curcumin, which is an anti-inflammatory. Curcumin is the active ingredient in the spice turmeric, and we know that turmeric is very good for a lot of chronic issues, particularly issues that have to do with inflammation. And yes, there is inflammation in migraine, so curcumin can be helpful. Also, there is feverfew in here. Feverfew is a natural herb product, which is an anti-inflammatory. And also there is some rosemary extract, and rosemary has also been shown to be helpful for not only migraine, but also cognitive health. So it's got 5 ingredients. So check it out, Calm. You can get 10% off if you use the link that I'm going to share in the show notes. So check it out. So supplementation was number 4. Now we're finally up to tip number 5 for natural migraine prevention, and that tip is sleep. So simple. Sleep. We all need sleep, right? But most of us probably are not getting good sleep. But the way you know you're getting adequate sleep, it's not, the same number for everyone. It's a very individual thing, just like hydration is a very individual thing. But basically, you should wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, that you're ready for the day, ready to get up and take on the world. Not that, I wish I could go back to sleep for another hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. If you're waking up feeling like really groggy and sleepy, it probably means your body needs more sleep. And another tip I'll give you about sleep is, and I'm guilty of this, I'm working on this still, is you should always strive to go to bed at the same time every day and wake up at the same time every morning. So you want regularity in your sleep schedule. And that should be regular regardless of whether it's the weekday and you have work, or if it's a weekend, or if you're on vacation. It is important for your brain to have that regularity. The brain craves regularity when it comes to migraine. So give your brain that expected restful sleep. And also, if you snore, this is another issue with sleep. Some people who have who snore actually have sleep apnea, underlying obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA, and that could potentially be contributing to their migraine. The people may wake up with a headache because they have sleep apnea. So if you do snore, please get it checked out. Maybe ask your primary care doctor for a referral for a sleep study. Now there are home sleep studies that you can do, but I would actually prefer, if you snore and you think that you may have sleep apnea, you're not getting great sleep at night, if you're falling asleep all the time during the day, it's possible that you may have sleep apnea. Get it checked out and get a proper sleep study. So those are my 5 tips to helping to manage migraine naturally. And these tips really help me turn around my migraine journey unbelievably. Like it was incredible, the benefits of making these dietary and lifestyle choices. So just to recap, tip number 1, diet. include the fruits and veggies, eliminate the processed stuff and the unhealthy stuff. Number 2, hydration. Make sure you're hydrating well according to your body weight and according to your activity needs. If you're working out, if you're in the hot sun, you're going to need more hydration. So you have to adjust your hydration needs for those types of days. And plus, if you're really, dehydrated, make sure you're getting enough electrolytes as well. Number 3, modulate your caffeine intake. It's not that you have to eliminate caffeine totally. No, you don't have to do that, but you have to decrease it down to a level that your body's adenosine receptors will still remain receptive to caffeine. So less than 2 cups of coffee a day. I love green tea, and it's got really low caffeine content, and it's only got about 12 milligrams of caffeine. So you can consider swapping out maybe some coffee for some green tea. Check it out. And then, so tip number 4 is to take a supplement. Magnesium and riboflavin are my go-tos, but you can also add on to that. You can take them separately, but that's why I have Calm, because it's all in a single easy bottle, a single easy capsule. You can also include feverfew, which also has enough research behind it to help support migraine that I'm a huge advocate of, and also curcumin and rosemary. So you can look for those 5 ingredients in a migraine supplement. Again, look at the show notes. You can get Calm for 10% off, and also have a good sleep regimen, or maintain healthy sleep habits. We hear about this all the time. Another big plus that happened for me with sleep is to get blackout curtains. Because I didn't realize it, but even that early morning light coming in, it was really disturbing my sleep, making me wake up like super early, way too early for when my body was ready to wake up. So invest in some good blackout curtains or shades for your bedroom, and see how you do with that. So those are my 5 best tips to manage migraine naturally. And I hope that you've learned some of these simple things that you can really use either for yourself, or maybe share them with a friend or family member, or if you're a provider, share them with your patients, because they're so, so easy to do and so impactful. But there is something that I left out, which is also really important in the management of migraine. Can you guess what it may be? Take a guess. It's actually, when it comes to migraine, it's the elephant in the room. And that is stress. I mentioned earlier that when I was in my period of my worst migraine for 5 years, I was incredibly stressed from multiple different factors. And, when I was in the middle of it, I was so overwhelmed. I didn't even think about what can I do? I didn't have time, but I had to make time. I had to make time for self-care, to do things that will help me modulate my stress. And now I make that a priority. But you know what I think I'm going to do is, in a future episode, I'm going to be talking about different ways that you can modulate your stress. Because there are so many things people can do. It's not just like sitting and meditating, saying, yes, you can do that. But there's so many other simple techniques, breathing techniques that can help you manage your stress levels, to help you decrease your sympathetic drive and increase your parasympathetic drive, that will help you put you in a more relaxed state. So many things you can do. So guess what? I'm going to do another episode on this. So it'll be my tip number 6 for managing migraine, which is how to best manage your stress levels, things you can do. All of us can benefit from this, right? We're all under stress. It's a part of life. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the IQ Podcast. I hope you've learned some great insights to help elevate and raise your IQ. I will see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the IQ Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something new to help elevate your IQ. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your friends. Stay connected with Dr. Rani Banik for more eye-opening insights on eye health, nutrition, and lifestyle. Until next time, keep your vision clear and your IQ sharp.